I think we'll just start here, Jarrod, in the pantheon of research that you've done, or even just in the modern day context. Where do you place Steve Smith? And funnily enough, obviously because of the scandal and so on and so forth, do you think he's still a bit underappreciated? Or do you think he's exactly where he belongs in the kind of conclusion of his career and what he's achieved?
I think that if you compare him to Lara or Tendulkar or even Ponting, Kohli, you could throw in there as well. They're just all better to watch. And
Yeah.
so I think there's always an element of that, right? Like, say whatever. It's really funny when you go back through the history of great batters, and it's like there's a guy called Clem Hill who played for Australia when Victor Trumper did. His numbers are almost identical to Victor Trumper's, right? Like, he's a little bit slower with his strike rate, but more or less a very similar level bat. No one has mentioned Clem Hill out loud outside of me in the last, 7 weeks, right? Whereas Victor Trumper, anywhere you go, there's an old cricket fan go, oh, I never watched him play, but if you read this, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Aesthetics matter. And we it's why Yunus Khan, for everything he did, is probably not going to be remembered quite in the same way that Inzi is, even if Yunus Khan is probably a slightly better batter than Inzi, right? Like, all things considered. So I think there's always that element. There's also the ball tampering. In fact, so I released an article today about Smith versus Sachin to see who. Basically, they're the two players mentioned the most as best since Bradman. And I got an email straight away from a very angry English fan going, well, you haven't even mentioned the ball tampering. And I was like, well, what's the ball tampering got to do with how good he is at batting, right? And so I think that there's, if it was Shoaib Akhtar or Shane Warne, who both got caught with, masking agents or performance-enhancing drugs, I'll be like, I think that should be mentioned in their records. But his batting has nothing to do with that. So I think there's an element of the ball tampering, and there's an element of he's not particularly fun to watch. Like, he's just not until he goes nuts and he starts playing. Have you ever seen that shot he played off Wahab Riaz in the 2016 World Cup, where the ball's literally being bowled off the pitch and he hits it to the leg side? Until he gets to that point, it's kind of just him nudging to backward square leg over and over again, isn't it? Right? That's like 90% of our memory is he's had a ball bowled outside a stump and it's gone to backward square leg. But I also think that the story is amazing when, as you said, no one thought he was going to be a champion cricketer. So he was a good underage batter, a great underage batter, but he makes his debut. And I was there for his second test. I think I'm right in saying it was his second test against Pakistan and England, right? Before they moved to the UAE for their neutral tests. And he made 77 batting at number 8 or 9. In fact, he mentions he batted number 9 in that series, and I looked it up. They just had a night watch ahead of him. Like, it's funny how it's like the Michael Jordan thing of like, how dare you bat me at number 9? I'm Steve Smith. And it's like, well, you were at 8, and then Mitchell Johnson went up ahead of you in one innings, right? But he made 77, and there was about 8 of us, mate, in the press conference. It was, we were in Headingley. I remember Bryden Coverdale was there. There was a couple of other Australian journalists. There was like one Pakistani journalist and one like English journalist in the room. And we asked Ricky Ponting, I can't remember if it was me or Bryden, was like, okay, he's now made 77. You guys picked him as a bowler. We all know he's a batter. Do you think he can even play? Can he ever bat in the top 6 for Australia? And Ricky Ponting was like, no. To go from that to a better batter than Ricky Ponting is one of the most incredible things. And it tells you about outsiders and non-conformity, that we have a real trouble and just looking at that. And my favorite thing in cricket is that we have Don Bradman, Murali, and Jeff Thompson, right? 3 incredible outliers, and no one ever did what they did again. Like, no, if you go back and watch Don Bradman, like, there was that thing about Don Bradman. Oh, when I watch Sachin Tendulkar, he bats like me. Don Bradman didn't bat like Sachin Tendulkar. Like, Sachin Tendulkar was a beautiful textbook. Don Bradman wasn't a beautiful textbook. He just invented his own version of batting. Jeff Thompson, fastest bowler we've ever seen compared to other bowlers in his era. There's no one ever been that much faster than everyone else in his era. When's the next Jeff Thompson accent we've ever seen? No one's ever come in and bowled like Jeff Thompson before. And Murali, for the same thing, right? And so we see this time and time again in cricket. And yet, it is the outliers who end up with the freakish records. And Smith is there. You ask me where he ends up. I think I still have him just outside. I can make a case. Bradman's obviously the best test batter of all time, I would say. It'd be very hard to make a case he's not. I think you can make a case that Sachin has an argument to be the best test batter of all time, right? I don't think you have that case with Smith right now. Now, having said that, he's made 300s in the last couple of weeks. If he goes on another run of averaging 50 and 60 in Test cricket for another 5 years, then we have to, change the way we think about that. But at the moment, I think he's in that tier just below, which would put him in where I would say you would have guys like Gavaskar, Viv Richards, Len Hutton. I think that's where Smith is at the moment. Had he continued on the same, if he not got hit by Jofra Archer, if people hadn't found a way to slow him down a little bit with scoring, I think then you have a case for him being at that Sachin level. But I think he's just marginally below that tier of having a case of being the best batter of all time.